This is episode 39 of the Arts Academy podcast with Victor Varnado and Roxxy Haze. How to start a podcast with special guest Kazeem Rahman.
This is the Arts Academy podcast brought to you by the New York Alt Arts Academy. Thank you for coming, everybody. We teach you everything about arts and entertainment that we possibly can. I am Dean Victor Varnado. This is Deputy Headmistress Roxxy Haze. Our very special guest today is Professor Kazeem Rahman.
Hello.
How's it going, Kazeem?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
It's wonderful for you to be here. I'm really excited that you're on the show, especially because you're going to dig into how to start a podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast before you dig in on how to start one?
Well, my podcast is Tough Choice with Kazeem Rahman. It's right behind me. It's 30 minutes of I bring stand-up comics on, and we play a very ignorant game of Would You Rather, essentially. Roxy, actually, when she was in LA recently, I forced her to do my podcast. It was very fun. And yeah, it's just 30 minutes of just pure ignorance, and we have different segments, and the podcast has definitely grown over time on the production value and my ability to hold a 30-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great. I actually want to check it out because it sounds like personality-wise, it's similar to Six Unseemly Questions, which is my podcast where I ask people basically ignorant questions and I ring a bell if I like their answers, and I give them $5 if I like them being on the show. I give them $5.
Your podcasts are ignorant.
We are ignorant podcasts.
Our podcasts are very
serious. Not.
It's fun.
You'll have to do my podcast, by the way.
Yeah,
all right,
definitely.
So why don't you talk about how to start a podcast?
So essentially, it's how to start a podcast is actually not that hard, right? So the types of podcasts would be, there's audio and then there's video, essentially, right? So, and then there's an audio version of the video format. So starting a podcast can be as easy as getting on your phone, getting the Anchor app, and then just talking into your phone or talking into voice notes, right? And then if you want to go further, you can talk into your voice notes and put it on your computer and then just make it sound better with a different filter with the free audio editing software. And then if you want to go further, you can store it on SoundCloud, or you can just put it on YouTube. You can put the audio version on YouTube. All that is free. What I do is I use a service called Lisbon, Liberated Syndication. They're the oldest podcast service around.
Oh, it's Libsyn.
So
Libsyn,
yeah, Liberated Syndication. Libsyn, Libsyn. Yeah, green and black. And there are other ones. I just use Libsyn. It was just the cheapest service for me. It's like $5 a month.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then essentially I push publish, and then it'll go to everywhere. So it'll go to Apple, it'll go to Spotify, it'll go to iHeart, it'll go to Stitcher, it'll go to all the different podcast services around with the click of a button. Now, on the back end, you do have to sign up for all those things. So even if you just have SoundCloud, you can still sign up for Spotify. It's free. All of that is free, by the way. Signing up to get your podcast on Spotify, on YouTube, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Music, all of that is 100% free. It should not cost you a dime. They just have different requirements as to what it is. You have to have some podcast art. Podcast art can just be a picture of you with some words, right? It's not even that hard. So starting one is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that your information is great. And I think what our students might benefit from also is kind of like breaking it down little by little. So I was just going to interject and maybe help make that happen. Like, for instance, so the hosting sites, like you're talking about Libsyn, I actually use one called Acast. Like the hosting sites, basically you pay them I'm just repeating what you said, but just like I think maybe shorter. You pay them to basically have a space to upload your podcast, and then often when you upload your podcast to a hosting site, they will automatically upload it to all these other sites if you signed up for them. So they'll automatically upload it to Apple or Google or Stitcher or whatever it is when you upload on this site. So it's actually no different than, say, having like a super private YouTube account on these hosting sites, and then you upload to those sites, and it serves it everywhere else for you.
Yeah, perfect. That's the perfect explanation. Yeah, definitely. So it makes it easier going forward. When you start off, definitely it's a pain to have to like go sign up for Spotify, and then you have to go sign up for Apple, and then Apple rejected my podcast like twice, and then I had to keep like submitting it, right? So things like that. But then going forward, a service like Libsyn or Acast or Anchor, for example, Anchor is actually free, by the way. It's on your phone. Things like that. Moving forward, as you keep doing episodes, it simplifies the process for you. Because I like to just keep things as simple as possible.
Me too. And a lot of those sites, I think also they will hold your hand through the process of signing up for all of those different platforms. The reason, by the way, if you're watching out there, the reason that people have hosting platforms is because the hosting platform is usually where your podcast is stored physically. So whenever anybody listens to your podcast on other sites, it's actually pulling from the hosting platform, and that's why you have to pay for it, because you're just paying for that space.
Yeah, you're paying for the storage.
Exactly. And then for your podcast, you were talking about having a logo for your podcast.
Yeah, I have a logo. I just had a friend. He's a comic. He likes to draw, so I asked him to make me a logo. And then I just had a vision, and that goes back to the previous episode of really sitting down and figuring out what you want your podcast to be about. So, I said I want my podcast to be a Would You Rather podcast. So it's like a decisions, and in my head it just popped up that Matrix thing where Morpheus is holding the two hands. So red and blue pill. So I just sent him a picture of like, yo, I have this idea. Here's what the podcast is. It's a tough choice. And then here's a picture of just two hands with red and blue pill. And he made this for me.
Right.
So tough choice. And at the bottom is just Kazeem Rahman. And then at first the hands were like really white, and I told him to darken them up a little bit.
Was he himself white?
Yeah, he's a white dude. So I was like, none of that white shit. Yeah, no, but yeah, it's great, right? And that's another thing of you have friends that can draw. You have friends that have like some artistic. I'm not artistic like this. I'm artistic in the sense of I can sit and have a conversation with somebody, right? And I can have an extended conversation for either from 20 to 30 minutes, and that's my ability. But I can't draw like that. So, I just have to, a lot of production of a podcast sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's just either doing things yourself in the simplest form and moving forward, or just delegating it to someone that can get the job done.
You actually reminded me of a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, because when I first started my podcast, I researched on designing the logo or the cover photo. And one thing that somebody said was, remember that your cover photo will be viewed at a bunch of different sizes. So make it simple and straightforward and easy to understand. They said a good rule of thumb is, imagine you were designing a postage stamp. Think about it shown that small, because like when it's on somebody's phone and it's on the left side of a column, it could be that small. Yeah. So when you're thinking about what the design is going to be like, you were smiling. What was that about?
No, I was just laughing at Roxy.
You're laughing at her being attacked by bees.
There was clearly a mosquito in her. And no, it's like you have to be from Houston to really understand what Roxy was doing.
It attacked me, and I was trying to not do things.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. But yeah, no, I agree with you on the design aspect. Making sure that the title is as big as possible, right? It's a little, at least you can read something, right? And then at the bottom, it's my name. So essentially, I didn't care for my face to be on the podcast, but sometimes, you know, you can put your face on the podcast. And sometimes, and a lot of the times, I agree with you. And a lot of the times your podcast doesn't have to be as, you know, intricate as this. It can literally just be you going on PowerPoint and then just typing up and just picking a cool font that you like and typing it up in different colors and having the colors match. And then that's the logo for your podcast. And the thing about the logo for your podcast is you can change it whenever you want to change it. So it never has to be set in stone. Nothing ever has to be set in stone.
100% true. One thing that I think that a lot of people aren't aware of is that you can have a different cover photo for every episode.
Oh yes, I do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to do. Do you have what's your actual website for your podcast?
Oh, it's not. I don't. It's just the Libsyn one.
So if I wanted to get to it, see your cover photos, what would I type?
It would go. The easiest way to do that is actually go to Instagram.
Okay.
And go to Instagram, Tough Choice Pod.
It's at Tough Choice Pod.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'm learning so much.
That's me. But if you click on the Tough Choice thing.
Okay.
In the middle one, you click on that, and you should be able to. I tag Tough Choice in the thing. So at the bottom left, if you click on the people, and then click on Tough Choice Pod right there.
Here we go to Tough Choice. There we are. Okay, yeah. And so the big so for each episode, it's Tough Choice, and then it's like a color block with like block letters on it.
Yes. So and that is the same guy that made my logo. So I said, hey, can I just like pay you like a small fee for the whole year, and you just you just edit it, and I get it to him. I get the month done, and then I just get it to him, and he gets me 6 quick flyers that are really good, and then different colors, and it just adds a different thing to your podcast. And essentially, and at the same time, you don't even necessarily have to do this. I have friends that have just their logo, and then when they post on Instagram, they take a picture of the Spotify picture, so it just shows their logo and it shows their title under it with a small description, and then they just screen grab that and then edit it into like a little box format and then post it on Instagram.
Yeah,
so
you can start a podcast like with very, very little resources. I mean, actually, just your phone is enough. This is I'm showing now the logo for Six Unseemly Questions, which is again like designed so it can be seen in a postage stamp, and then for each episode we have designed just pretty much a banner that goes across the lower middle of a photo, and then we just use photos from people's Facebooks for their episode.
Yeah.
Like
and
a very simple.
I have a friend that has he has a podcast that it's all about dating, and then he just has a picture of him pointing to his left with a red jacket on, and then whoever the guest is just a photo from Facebook. So it can be as simple, it can be as intricate as you want, or it can be as simple as you want. Just make it easy for you and unique for you.
I absolutely agree. So if you have any questions out there, now would be a very good time to ask them because we're just about to wrap up. But before we do wrap up, do you have anything else that you think that people who are about to start a podcast should know, Kazeem?
I think the one thing that, and it goes with stand-up comedy, it goes with podcasts, just start. Really,
Uh-huh.
just start it. It doesn't have to be high def. It doesn't have to be. It's not going to be good the first 20. If you look at my most recent release, and then you look at and then you go listen to like the first 3 episodes, the first 3 episodes were absolute garbage. Right? I didn't know how to edit correctly. It would take me so long to edit one episode. I would always just constantly interrupt people because I just didn't know how to host anything. And that just comes with you learning how to do a podcast. Everyone should do a podcast because it helps them be better on other people's podcasts as well. And it helps you just get more structured. It helps you understand production in the sense of, these are the things that need to happen for this podcast to be good, or this podcast to be submitted to Libsyn or Apple and stuff like that.
We do have a question from Leslie Ware. That is my wife. She says, what was your favorite episode of your podcasts and why? What was your favorite episode of your podcast?
That is hard to answer simply because most of my podcasts are with my friends, and I would say there's like favorite moments, right? So like I'll use Roxy as an example. Roxy's episode isn't even out yet, but Roxy had a way of answering a question and giving so many loopholes that you're not even answering the question.
He was getting so mad.
Very funny. Yeah, no, like legit. I'd be having arguments with people on my podcast because that's just the way the podcast is, right? So I wouldn't say there's a favorite episode. I would say there's a lot of favorite moments, and that's just a lot of them, right? With Roxy, the highlights I use a lot. So on my Instagram at Tough Choice Pod, on my Instagram I made like kinetic lyric videos of like different highlights, and that helps. It helps promote. It keeps me sane. Having a creative way to like promote the podcast kind of keeps me sane. So I'll use like different avenues of creativity, and then I'll do like little audio snippets, and then tell someone to go make like the little lyric videos like they do for music. I'll do like that. So those are kind of my favorite moments, but I wouldn't say I have a favorite episode overall.
Okay, I would say one of my favorite episodes, because I have a couple that are my favorite, but one of my favorite episodes is one of my first episodes, which actually starred this just crazy bartender at this bar that was nearby where I lived. I'm actually just trying to bring it up on screen right now. She is actually on Instagram. Her name is Kay Sabri. She hates to be called an Instagram model, but she definitely is on Instagram showing herself off a lot. So I don't know what to tell you, but and her podcast, the title is "What's the Biggest Lie You Ever Told?" It is episode 2, because everything that came out of her mouth was shocking. That's why it was one of my favorite episodes. It's just there was nothing that was not shocking about what came out of her mouth. It was really a lot of fun. All right, so we have looks like I have another question. The question is, I want to start in high def though. What mics are y'all using? What recording software?
Here's the greatest advice that I wish I would have gotten in the beginning. To make it high def, it really isn't the mics, it's really just the editing, essentially. So I use these Rode Podcaster mics that are really good, but they're $100 each, right? But when I started, I was using these $25 mics that are still good, and all you have to do is put it in your editing software, and it can make it high def with a filter. Essentially.
Right. Well, I also agree that you don't need an expensive mic to start out. However, I will say this: there is a difference between a excellent vocal mic and a crappy one. However, you don't have to pay a lot for a good vocal mic. You can get a pretty good vocal mic, I would say, for $40. You can get a really good one. And
for software, I'm using Adobe Audition. If you have a MacBook, GarageBand, I think is free. I don't know. I've never used a Mac, so I'm not 100% sure. But there is a free thing called Audacity, and that's free. That's 100% free, and that can edit your software. That can edit your audio perfectly. And sometimes people don't even edit their audio. They just
a lot of people don't even edit their audio at all. You can use also any free video editing software. You can also edit audio with, because you don't actually have to export video. You could just export the audio. I've done that before. Sometimes it's easier because when the audio editing platforms sometimes have a lot of bells and whistles that the video platforms don't have for audio, which means the editing process is even simpler. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it.
But for mics, I would say go to Amazon and then just type in best mics for podcasting, and then just make sure you look at the reviews, right? Because people will be very honest on what kind of mics, on if the mics are good or not.
Right. And I will even do you one better. There's such a huge podcasting community that if you go to YouTube and type best podcasting mics for cheap, people have done side-by-side comparisons with so many mics for you. And then you can just go look at that video. And then, in fact, that's how I found this mic, which actually cost me less than $30. And this mic cost me less than $30, and it's great because basically they tested this mic against a mic that cost $200, and they said that the difference was minimal.
Yeah, I agree. And those like little mic covers are like $1 for 10 of them at like Fry's Electronics. Yeah, or if you really want, and you said you can also go to like an a music store, like Guitar Center or Fry's Electronics, and there's gonna be someone there to like walk you through what mics are good and what mics aren't as good. So there's lots of resources and of what budget you are and how you want your podcast, and if you have a desk, or whether or not you want like a stand for it, if you want like the arm, I'm sure you have, Victor, or something like that. There's just so things. There's just understand that no matter what budget you have, it's usually how you edit it that makes it sound good, but also the mic can be a game changer as well, as you said.
Right. And I would suggest 3 different levels of podcasting. One is where you spend $0 because you can actually use your phone to do podcasting too. In fact, I worked on a reality show where we did temporary voiceover and the reality show over a phone, like just talking into a phone's recorder. And then that actually ended up on air because when you have music underneath or whatever, people really can't tell the difference, or if it's recorded in a quiet place. Number 2 is spending as little money as possible to make your podcast sound like high end or pro. That is a combination of editing, and then you could probably spend less than $100 on all of your equipment and still have your podcast sound as good as pro stuff, as long as you study up a little bit on what you're doing. And then number 3, yes, you can spend a lot of money to get like high end everything, but why would you do that unless your podcast is already making you money?
Yeah. And just to add to that also, if you're going to use music, you can go to SoundCloud and find an artist you like, and then just send them an email. Honestly, you can send them an email and say, hey, can I have your song for my podcast? It's rare that they're going to say no, And especially if you just say, hey, I'll give you credit each episode, like music by such and such, it's, you're probably going to get a no 2 times, but the third person will say yes.
Also, on websites like YouTube, they've actually already cleared the rights to a lot of music for you. So YouTube has a library of music that is absolutely free, and then some of it is non-attribution music, meaning that you can use it in any project for any reason, but YouTube just paid those artists so they could have songs. So they have a library of like over 100 songs that you can choose from there. In fact, if you were here at the very beginning of this live stream, now a podcast, if you're listening to this in the edited version, hello. Anyway, if you're here at the very beginning, then the music that I was playing was actually music from that library. And there are libraries out there that's a free music archive all over the place. Sometimes people will give it to you for free. There's a website named Incompetech where he'll give you the music for just a credit. So as long as you credit him, you can use the music. There's lots of stuff out there. There's lots of free resources. We should do an episode on it because there's free resources of every type of media that you could think of.
I'll add that to the list.
And I think for the 2 things that I'm happy that I learned early on is when I wanted to decide what podcast to do. The one question to ask yourself is, what do you like to talk about, right? And then move from there. So for me, how I came up with my Tough Choice podcast is I genuinely like to have very stupid conversations with my friends, right? And I start from there. It's like, okay, well, how can I structure that? And it doesn't even need to be, every podcast needs to be structured. Every podcast is structured, actually. Even if you listen to Joe Rogan, it's an interview podcast, but he kind of has an idea of what he wants to talk about, and his transitions are very smooth, right?
I think that is true of Joe Rogan's podcast, but I would not stand by every podcast is structured.
Even if you're just talking, though, that's a form of structure.
Every good podcast is structured. I'll say that. Every good podcast is structured. You're absolutely right. Yeah, not every podcast is structured, but all the podcasts that I see as good podcasts have some sort of structure to it. Even if the structure is, we're going to shoot the shit for an hour, right? Even if the structure is that simple, that's still some sort of structure, right? So what do you like to talk about? And then even if you don't like to talk about anything, talk about anything, right? Because there's no such thing as, what if I run out of things to talk about, right? There are bar games that you can look up online that you can do on your podcast just to have something to fill, right? So if you're a comedian, I would say the one advice that I got that was perfect is don't focus on funny so much, focus on interesting. You're already a funny person. So the funny will happen. Don't worry about the funny. But if you focus on interesting, then it'll be a better podcast. Because a lot of times people don't understand. For me, especially when I'm listening to a podcast, I'm not sitting and listening. I'm doing something else. So can you be the background of someone working on something, right? So and that requires you to be some sort of interesting, right? And everybody's interesting. You just have to find what you like to talk about. You're going to be more interesting if you're talking about something, if you're passionate about something. Like I've had conversations with Roxxy about anime, right? And then Roxxy can go on for 3 hours.
Really? Roxxy?
Yeah, exactly. Roxxy Haze. About anime.
Anime? What?
Yeah, exactly. About like Dragon Ball Z and like the different types of Dragon Ball Z and all this other stuff. Roxxy can talk about that, but if I say, Roxxy, let's do a podcast about quantum physics, you're gonna be like, exactly, I'm good. I'm not going to be a 5-minute podcast, right? So
I do have a podcast about anime and other things. It's called Bedtime B Word. Please check it out on Twitch. Continue.
All right. Well, actually, speaking of continue, let's wrap it up.
We are over.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're our podcast. We keep each episode pretty short, but you covered quite a bit, Kazeem. Thank you so much.
We were cooking with sauce. I liked it. I feel like I learned a lot that I can take with me for my 2 podcasts, which you can hear on Twitch.
And Kazeem, do you want to tell everybody where to find your podcast one more? You want to tell everybody where to find your podcast one more time?
Yeah, Tough Choice with Kazeem Rahman. It's on everywhere. You can find it on Spotify. It's on Stitcher. It's on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It's pretty much on everything. If you just search Tough Choice with Kazeem Rahman, or if you just search my name, Kazeem Rahman, I very shamelessly promote my podcast constantly. So it's very easy to find nowadays, which is fun.
Right on. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're at Alt Arts Academy on all social media. Remember to go to our Facebook page, please, and go to altartsacademy.com to sign up for it. All right. That was pretty good. All right. Thanks, everybody.